What if I told you that for 185 million years, Earth was ruled not by ice or humans, but by creatures so magnificent they seem like mythology made real? Not only happened, but it could change how you see reality forever. Picture this: a world where the very ground beneath your feet was alive with the footsteps of giants, where the air hummed with wings spanning the length of school buses, where flowers had never bloomed, yet life flourished in ways that would make our modern world seem almost quiet. But here's the twist that scientists tried to understand for decades. This wasn't just a time of monsters and mayhem. The Mesozoic Era was Earth's greatest experiment in balance, beauty, and biological innovation. It was a symphony of life played on a scale we can barely comprehend. In the next 3 hours, you'll drift into calm while uncovering the hidden truths of this ancient world. This isn't just science, it's your story, written across the fabric of deep time, carved into stone and whispered through the wind that still carries the memory of that primordial atmosphere. Tonight, we'll walk together through a world that existed long before your great-grandmother's great-grandmother could even dream of existence. We'll breathe the thick, humid air of the Mesozoic. We'll witness the first flower bloom. We'll stand in the shadow of creatures that defied every rule of what life could become. If you love journeys like this, settle deeper into your pillow, close your eyes, and let your mind wander to a time when Earth wore a completely different face. And comment where in the world you're listening from tonight. Imagine waking up tomorrow morning and stepping outside to find that every tree, every flower, every blade of grass had vanished overnight. The world would feel naked, alien, wrong somehow. Yet for the first 50 million years of the Mesozoic Era, this was exactly what Earth looked like. No roses perfumed the air, no oak trees provided shade, no grass cushioned the footsteps of the enormous creatures that ruled this world. Instead, ancient ferns unfurled like green umbrellas, cycads stood like primitive palm trees, and conifers stretched toward a sky that held 50% more carbon dioxide than the atmosphere you're breathing right now. But here's where the story becomes truly extraordinary. Without flowers, without the intricate partnerships between plants and pollinators that we take for granted, life found other ways to flourish, other ways to create beauty, other ways to fill every possible niche in an ecosystem that spanned from pole to pole without a single ice cap to interrupt its flow. The temperature across this ancient Earth averaged 18 degrees Fahrenheit warmer than today. There were no frozen polar caps, no glaciers carving valleys, no seasons as we know them. Instead, there was a world wrapped in perpetual warmth, where even the Arctic regions enjoyed a climate similar to modern-day Florida. Close your eyes and feel yourself transported back 252 million years to the very beginning of this remarkable era. You're standing on the supercontinent of Pangaea, a massive landmass that contains all of Earth's continents pressed together like puzzle pieces that haven't yet decided to drift apart. The air is thick and humid, carrying scents you've never encountered. The oxygen level is lower than what you're used to, making each breath feel dense and substantial. But this atmosphere, this alien air, is perfect for the creatures that call this world home. In the distance you hear sounds that don't exist in your time. Not the chirping of birds, for birds as you know them don't yet exist. Not the buzzing of bees, for flowers haven't yet evolved their sweet partnerships with pollinators. Instead, you hear the rustle of massive fern fronds in the constant breeze, the splash of something large moving through a nearby river, and a low, rumbling call that seems to come from the very Earth itself. This is the sound of Earth's greatest biological experiment beginning. This is the moment when life, having survived the greatest extinction event in planetary history just a few million years earlier, decided to try something completely new, something bigger, something that would redefine what it meant to be alive on this planet. The creatures stirring in this ancient landscape aren't just large, they're revolutionary. They represent evolutionary leaps that seem almost impossible, yet here they are, breathing, moving, living in ways that challenge every assumption about what life can become. But what's most shocking isn't their size or their strangeness, it's how perfectly they fit into this world without flowers, this world without ice, this world that seems to operate on entirely different rules than the Earth you know. They're not struggling to survive in an alien environment, they're thriving in their own perfect moment of planetary harmony. In 1822, a young woman named Mary Ann Mantell was walking along a country road in Sussex, England, when she noticed something glinting in a pile of stones. What she picked up that day was a tooth unlike anything anyone had ever seen, large as a human thumb, but ridged and worn in a way that spoke of a life spent grinding tough plant matter. Her husband, Gideon Mantell, was a country doctor with a passion for fossils. When Mary Ann showed him the tooth, he knew immediately that it belonged to something extraordinary, something that challenged the very foundation of how people understood the history of life on Earth. This was one of the first dinosaur teeth ever discovered, though the word dinosaur wouldn't be coined for another 20 years. Dr. Mantell named the creature Iguanodon, the iguana tooth, because the fossil resembled the teeth of modern iguanas, only enormously enlarged. But here's the revelation that changed everything. This wasn't just the discovery of an ancient creature, it was proof that Earth had once been home to an entirely different kind of life that operated on scales and in ways that the modern world had never seen. Let your mind drift back to that moment of discovery. Feel the weight of that ancient tooth in your palm. Imagine the creature it came from, standing 16 feet tall, 30 feet long, moving through forests of ferns and cycads with the majesty of a living mountain. The Iguanodon wasn't alone. As more fossils emerged from quarries and cliffsides across Europe and America, a picture began to form of Earth's Middle Age, the Mesozoic Era, when reptiles ruled not just the land, but the sea and sky as well. Picture the oceans of the Triassic period, the first act of our Mesozoic drama. The water is warm, almost bath-like and crystal clear near the shores of Pangaea. But beneath the surface lurks something that would make today's great white sharks seem like minnows. Lead-Zichthys swims through these ancient waters, a fish the length of 3 school buses, filter feeding on plankton with the peaceful efficiency of a whale. But sharing these waters are predators that dwarf anything in modern oceans. Leopleurodon, with jaws longer than a small car, powered by muscles that could generate bite forces measured in tons per square inch. The sky above these warm seas belongs to the pterosaurs, Earth's first powered flyers. Not birds, not bats, but something entirely unique. Creatures with wings made of skin stretched between enormously elongated finger bones, some species small as sparrows, others with wingspans that challenged the very physics of flight. But perhaps most remarkably on land, the first dinosaurs were taking their tentative steps toward an evolutionary experiment that would last for over 160 million years. These early dinosaurs were modest creatures, most no larger than dogs, but they carried within their bones and blood the potential for something unprecedented in Earth's history. They possessed a secret that would allow them to grow larger than any land animal before or since, to diversify into forms ranging from delicate feathered hunters to massive long-necked browsers that could strip leaves from the tops of 100-foot trees. That secret was their respiratory system, a complex network of air sacs that made their breathing more efficient than any reptile, bird, or mammal. It was an evolutionary innovation that would support bodies of impossible size and enable levels of activity that seemed to defy the laws of reptilian physiology. As you settle deeper into rest, imagine yourself witnessing these first tentative steps toward gigantism, toward a world where being large wasn't just an advantage, it was an art form. The most beautiful secret of the Mesozoic era isn't what we expected to find, it's what we never imagined could exist. For decades after those first fossil discoveries, scientists painted a picture of the Mesozoic as a time of cold-blooded giants, sluggish creatures that spent their days basking in the sun like enormous lizards, moving slowly through swampy landscapes, waiting for mammals to evolve intelligence and take over the world. But then something extraordinary happened in the 1960s. A paleontologist named John Ostrom discovered a small dinosaur in Montana, a creature he named Deinonychus, the terrible claw. What he found changed everything we thought we knew about these ancient animals. Deinonychus wasn't sluggish or dim-witted. Its skeleton spoke of a creature built for speed, agility, and intelligence. Its bones were hollow like a bird's, its legs were built for running, and most remarkably, it possessed a large, sickle-shaped claw on each foot that could be held off the ground while walking and deployed like a switchblade during an attack. But the real revelation came from studying how these bones fit together. Deinonychus moved like a bird. Its tail was stiffened by overlapping tendons that turned it into a dynamic counterbalance. Its arms could fold against its body in exactly the same way a bird folds its wings. Its brain was proportionally larger than that of any living reptile. This discovery opened a door to a hidden world. Scientists began to look at dinosaur fossils with new eyes, and what they found was astonishing. These weren't primitive, cold-blooded reptiles struggling to survive in a hostile world. They were sophisticated, highly evolved creatures, perfectly adapted to their environment. Let yourself imagine the true Mesozoic world, not the swampy, sluggish realm of old textbooks, but a dynamic, vibrant planet where intelligence took forms we're only beginning to understand. Picture a pack of Deinonychus moving through a forest of primitive conifers. They communicate with soft chirps and clicks, their large eyes constantly scanning for movement. Their movements are fluid, coordinated, almost dance-like. When they spot their prey, a peaceful Tenontosaurus browsing among the ferns, their attack is swift and precisely choreographed. But even more remarkable than their hunting prowess is what scientists discovered when they looked closer at dinosaur fossils from around the world. Many species showed evidence of complex social behaviors. Some traveled in herds, numbering in the thousands. Others built elaborate nests and cared for their young with a devotion that rivals modern birds. In Montana, paleontologists discovered a dinosaur nesting ground that had been used for hundreds of years. Generation after generation of Maiasaura, the good mother lizard, returned to the same hillside to lay their eggs in carefully constructed mud nests. Parents brought food to their hatchlings for weeks, protecting them from predators and teaching them the skills they would need to survive. But perhaps the most unexpected twist of all was hiding in plain sight, literally written in stone but invisible until scientists developed new techniques for reading the fossil record. In the 1990s, Chinese paleontologists began discovering dinosaur fossils preserved in volcanic ash, so fine that it captured details no one had ever seen before. And what they found revolutionized our understanding of the Mesozoic world forever. Dinosaurs had feathers. Not just birds, which scientists already knew were dinosaurs, but many of the classic dinosaur species. Small theropods were covered in downy proto-feathers for insulation. Larger species had elaborate plumes for display. Some had feathers arranged in patterns of stunning beauty with iridescent colors that shimmered in the ancient sunlight. The Mesozoic world wasn't gray and brown and monotonous. It was a riot of color and pattern, a world where 30-foot predators might have sported brilliant red crests, or emerald green racing stripes, or deep purple arm feathers that caught the light as they moved through the forest. Imagine standing in a Jurassic woodland watching a Sinornithosaurus, no larger than a house cat but covered in beautiful black feathers tipped with white, as it leaps from branch to branch in pursuit of early mammals. Or witnessing a Therizinosaurus, a massive plant eater with claws the size of baseball bats and a coat of shaggy feathers that makes it look like a 15-foot-tall bipedal sloth. This is the hidden reality of the Mesozoic, a world where the impossible was commonplace, where beauty and function combined in ways that challenged every assumption about what life could become. Tonight, as you rest in the comfort of your modern world, you carry within your very cells a direct connection to that ancient Mesozoic realm. It's a connection so intimate, so fundamental, that most people never realize it exists. Every breath you take contains molecules that once filled the lungs of a brontosaurus. Every drop of water you drink has flowed through the rivers where Diplodocus stooped to drink. The calcium in your bones, the iron in your blood, the carbon that forms the backbone of every protein in your body, all of it has been recycling through Earth's systems for billions of years. But the connection goes deeper than shared atoms. It reaches into the very architecture of life itself. Your breathing, the steady rhythm that carries you towards sleep, operates on principles first perfected in the Mesozoic. The efficiency of your respiratory system, the way oxygen moves from your lungs into your bloodstream, the chemical processes that extract energy from the food you eat, all of these evolved from innovations that first appeared in the Age of Dinosaurs. Birds, the direct descendants of dinosaurs, possess the most efficient respiratory system on Earth. When you watch a hummingbird hover at a flower or see geese flying in formation across the sky, you're witnessing the living legacy of Mesozoic innovation. The same physiological breakthroughs that allowed a Giganotosaurus to support a body weighing 7 tons now enable a tiny bird to fly non-stop across oceans. Let your breathing slow and deepen as you contemplate this connection. Feel the air filling your lungs, carrying life-giving oxygen to every cell in your body through processes refined over hundreds of millions of years. You are not separate from this ancient world. You are its continuation, its latest chapter in an ongoing story of life's endless creativity. The very ground you live upon carries the signature of Mesozoic time. The limestone that forms the foundations of countless buildings was laid down in Mesozoic seas, formed from the shells and skeletons of countless marine creatures. The coal that powered the Industrial Revolution came largely from Mesozoic forests. The oil that drives much of our modern civilization is the transformed remains of Mesozoic marine life. But perhaps most remarkably, the emotional experience you have when you encounter something truly awe-inspiring, that feeling of wonder and smallness in the face of natural grandeur, is something you share with the intelligent dinosaurs of the Mesozoic. Scientists studying modern birds, those living dinosaurs, have found evidence of complex emotional lives. Ravens mourn their dead. Parrots form lifelong friendships. Many species demonstrate what can only be called aesthetic appreciation, decorating their nests or displaying elaborate courtship behaviors that seem to serve no purpose other than beauty. When you look up at a starry sky and feel that sense of cosmic wonder, when you stand at the edge of an ocean and feel both peaceful and humbled, when you watch a sunrise paint the clouds in shades of gold and pink, you're experiencing emotions that may have first evolved in creatures that lived alongside the dinosaurs, emotions that were refined and intensified during the long Mesozoic ages. Imagine for a moment a triceratops standing at the edge of a vast inland sea at sunset. The low angle of the sun illuminates its elaborate frill, casting intricate shadows through the bone and creating patterns of light that shift with every slight movement of its massive head. Does this creature experience something like what you feel when you witness natural beauty? The evidence suggests it might. Modern elephants, creatures with brain complexity similar to many large dinosaurs, have been observed standing motionless for long periods while watching sunsets. They show behaviors that look remarkably like contemplation, like aesthetic appreciation, like wonder. Your capacity for finding peace in natural settings, for feeling restored by time spent in forests or by water, for being soothed by the sounds of wind and rain, these too may be ancient inheritances, emotional responses first shaped during the long, slow ages when Earth wore its Mesozoic face. As sleep begins to call to you more insistently, let yourself feel this deep connection. You are not an accident of evolution, not a brief candle flickering in an indifferent universe. You are the cosmos becoming conscious of itself, the latest expression of a creativity that has been at work for hundreds of millions of years, that found its voice in the songs of Mesozoic creatures and continues to speak through your dreams, your hopes, your capacity for wonder. The same forces that shaped the great dinosaurs are still shaping you. The same Earth that supported those magnificent creatures supports you now. The same sun that warmed their faces warms yours. You are part of an unbroken chain of life that stretches back to the very beginning of the Mesozoic Era and forward to futures we can barely imagine. Tonight, as you surrender to sleep, you join the great rest that has refreshed living creatures for hundreds of millions of years. Your rest is continuous with the rest of dinosaurs, the hibernation of ancient mammals, the seasonal dormancy of Mesozoic plants. You are participating in rhythms older than continents, deeper than mountains, as natural and necessary as the turning of the Earth itself. Remember how we began this journey with the startling realization that Earth once thrived for 185 million years without a single flower? Now, as we drift deeper into the Mesozoic world, we can begin to understand just how profound that absence truly was, and how life found ways to create beauty and complexity that we're only beginning to appreciate. The world of the early Mesozoic was painted in shades of green and brown and rust. Imagine walking through a forest where every plant is either a fern, a conifer, a cycad, or a moss, where the closest thing to a flower is the cone of a pine tree or the spore-bearing structure of a giant horsetail. Yet this world was far from barren. Life had found other ways to create spectacle, other forms of beauty, other expressions of the endless creativity that drives evolution forward through time. The insects of the Mesozoic were giants. Dragonflies with wingspans measured in feet rather than inches patrolled the warm air above rivers and lakes. Their wings caught the light like stained glass windows, creating rainbow flashes as they darted after prey. But the most remarkable aspect of this pre-flowering world was how perfectly balanced it had become. Without the complex partnerships between flowering plants and their pollinators, ecosystems operated on different principles entirely. Everything was larger, more stable, more patient. Trees grew for hundreds of years, some for thousands. The massive conifers of the Jurassic period were among the largest plants that ever lived, some reaching heights that made modern redwoods seem modest by comparison. These ancient giants created cathedral-like groves where the air was soft and golden, filtered through needles that had been drinking sunlight since before your ancestors were even a glimmer in evolution's eye. In these groves, life moved at a different pace. The great sauropods, those long-necked giants that capture our imagination like no other creatures, spent their days in a meditation of eating. They moved through the forest like living rivers, their necks swaying from side to side as they stripped needles from branches 50 feet above the ground. Picture yourself standing beneath a brachiosaurus as it feeds. Its head is so far above you that it seems to occupy a different world entirely, a realm of sky and treetops where the air is thinner and the wind carries different scents. The sound of its feeding is like a gentle rain, the constant whisper of needles being stripped from branches, the soft rhythm of jaws working through tons of vegetation each day. But the most beautiful secret of these pre-flowering forests was their silence. Not empty silence, but the deep, contemplative quiet of a world that had learned to thrive without haste. The sounds that did exist, the footfalls of giants, the rustle of fern fronds, the distant calls of pterosaurs, all seemed to arise from and disappear back into a profound peace. This was a world that had achieved something our modern Earth has never known: perfect sustainability. For over 100 million years, these ecosystems remained essentially unchanged. The same species of trees grew in the same forests, fed the same species of dinosaurs who walked the same paths worn by millions of generations of their ancestors. It was a world without waste, without extinction, without the desperate race for resources that characterizes so much of modern ecology. Everything had its place, its purpose, its perfect role in a system so stable that it seems almost like a dream of what life could be when given time to find its rhythm. But beneath this stability, something extraordinary was building. The same forces that had created the giants were preparing for one of the most beautiful innovations in the history of life. The first flowers were evolving, hidden in the genetic code of obscure shrubs, waiting for their moment to transform Earth once again. As you let your breathing slow and deepen, imagine yourself present at that moment of transformation, witnessing the first flower open its petals to the Mesozoic sun. It's a small thing, modest and unremarkable, yet it carries within itself the power to change everything that comes after. This is the mystery that called to us at the beginning of our journey. How could Earth thrive so completely without something that now seems so essential? The answer lies not in what was missing, but in what was present. A patience, a stability, a willingness to let life unfold at its own pace that created conditions where the truly impossible became not just possible, but inevitable. Deep in the heart of the Cretaceous period, something was happening that defied every law of physics as we understand them. Creatures were walking the Earth that seemed too large to exist, too massive to move, too impossible to be real. Argentinosaurus stretched over 100 feet from head to tail and weighed as much as 12 elephants. Yet this mountain of flesh and bone could walk, could run when necessary, could lift its head 60 feet into the air to browse from the tops of the tallest trees. How was such a thing possible? The answer lies in a series of evolutionary innovations so elegant, so perfectly coordinated, that they seem almost like magic. These creatures had solved problems that modern engineers still struggle with. They had found ways to be enormous and graceful, massive and efficient, giant and alive. Let your mind drift into the body of one of these impossible giants. Feel the rhythm of footsteps that shake the ground for miles around, yet are placed with the precision of a dancer. Each step is calculated to distribute over 80 tons of weight without sinking into soft earth or stumbling over obstacles. The secret begins with their bones. Dinosaur bones weren't solid like those of most reptiles or mammals. They were filled with air spaces, honeycombed with chambers that made them simultaneously lighter and stronger than any bone structure we see in modern animals. A femur from Argentinosaurus, over 8 feet long, weighed less than you might expect because half its volume was filled with air. But the genius of dinosaur engineering went far deeper than hollow bones. Their entire respiratory system was unlike anything alive today. Like modern birds, they possessed air sacs throughout their bodies, extensions of their lungs that reached into their bones, their muscles, even their internal organs. When a sauropod took a breath, air flowed through its body in a one-way circuit, never mixing fresh air with used air, never creating the dead spaces that limit the efficiency of mammalian lungs. Every breath was a complete exchange. Every heartbeat delivered fully oxygenated blood to muscles that could support impossible size. Imagine the feeling of breathing with such efficiency. Each breath you take fills not just your lungs but air sacs throughout your body. Your bones become part of your respiratory system. Your very skeleton participates in the act of breathing, becoming lighter with each inhalation. But perhaps most remarkably, these giants had hearts that could pump blood 60 feet upward against gravity, delivering life to brains that floated among the treetops. The heart of a large sauropod was a 4-chambered engine the size of a small car, generating blood pressure that would seem fatal to any mammal, but was perfectly calibrated for a creature whose head existed in a different atmospheric zone than its feet. Scientists studying these creatures have discovered that they lived their entire lives in a state that would be extreme athleticism for any modern animal. Their metabolism ran at levels that supported constant movement, constant growth, constant activity. They were not sluggish, cold-blooded reptiles warming themselves in the sun. They were high-performance biological machines operating at the very limits of what carbon-based life can achieve. Yet they moved through their world with a serenity that speaks of perfect adaptation. Watch a giraffe moving across the African savanna, and you can glimpse something of how these ancient giants might have carried themselves. There's no struggle, no effort, just the smooth flow of a body perfectly designed for its purpose. The long necks of sauropods weren't just feeding tools, they were sensory organs, periscopes that could sample air currents 60 feet above ground level, detecting the scent of fresh vegetation from miles away, monitoring weather patterns, communicating with other members of their species through low-frequency calls that carried across vast distances. Picture yourself standing in a Cretaceous forest as a herd of these giants passes through. The ground trembles with a rhythm like slow thunder. Trees sway as necks longer than telephone poles sweep through the canopy. The air fills with the scent of crushed vegetation and the deep, musical calls that pass between individuals like whales singing in a green ocean. But the most impossible thing about these creatures wasn't their size, it wasn't their efficiency, it wasn't their grace, it was their gentleness. These were not predators or aggressors, they were contemplatives, creatures who had achieved perfect harmony with their environment by growing so large that nothing could threaten them, so efficient that they needed to compete with nothing, so well adapted that they could afford to be peaceful. In a world where survival of the fittest is often misunderstood as survival of the most aggressive, these giants proved that sometimes the highest evolutionary achievement is the ability to be gentle. They were living proof that size could serve peace rather than violence. That power could be used for contemplation rather than conquest. As you settle deeper into rest, let yourself embody something of their serenity. Feel the slow, steady rhythm of a metabolism designed for patience rather than panic. Feel the deep breaths that nourish every cell in your body. Feel the solid presence of a creature so perfectly adapted to its world that it has nothing to fear, nothing to fight, nothing to prove. There comes a moment in every deep exploration of the natural world when the facts and figures fall away, and you're left face to face with something that transcends scientific understanding, something that speaks to a deeper part of your being, to the part of you that remembers what it feels like to be truly amazed. We've traveled now deep into the Mesozoic world, walked among giants, breathed the thick air of ancient atmospheres, witnessed innovations that seem to border on the miraculous. But the greatest secret of this vanished world isn't something you can measure or categorize, it's something you can only feel. The Mesozoic Era represents the longest period of biological harmony our planet has ever known. For 185 million years, life experimented with forms and functions and relationships that created a stability so profound it seems almost alien to our modern understanding of how ecosystems work. Picture the Earth from space during the height of the Jurassic period. No ice caps gleam at the poles, no deserts scar the continents. Instead, Green spreads from pole to pole, broken only by the warm blue of shallow seas that reach far into what we now call dry land. The entire planet pulses with life, a living sphere where every available niche is filled by creatures perfectly adapted to their roles. In the forests, the great sauropods move like living prayers, their heads swaying among the treetops in rhythms that have remained unchanged for millions of years. They are attended by smaller dinosaurs that pick insects from their skin, creating partnerships based not on competition but on mutual benefit. In the skies, pterosaurs soar on thermals that rise from sun-warmed continents, their wings barely moving as they ride air currents with a mastery that makes human flight seem crude and desperate. Some species have learned to sleep while airborne, landing only to mate and lay eggs, spending their entire adult lives in the embrace of the wind. In the oceans, marine reptiles have evolved into forms that seem to embody pure elegance. Plesiosaurs, with necks like living ribbons, swim through warm seas with the grace of underwater dancers. Ichthyosaurs, shaped like dolphins but the size of whales, dive to depths where bioluminescent creatures create underwater galaxies of living light. But the true magic of this world lies not in any single species, but in how they all fit together. Every creature, from the tiniest pterosaur to the most massive sauropod, exists in perfect balance with every other. Predators and prey dance together in patterns that have been perfected over geological ages. Plants and plant-eaters maintain relationships of such stability that forests can grow for thousands of years without disturbance. This was a world that had learned the secret of sustainable abundance. Not the desperate abundance of rapid growth and quick collapse that characterizes modern ecosystems, but the patient abundance of systems that have found their perfect rhythm and settled into it for the long term. Imagine what it would feel like to live in such a world, to wake each morning knowing that your place in the great web of life was secure, that your needs would be met, that the patterns that sustained you had been tested and proven over millions of years. To exist without anxiety about the future, without desperate competition for limited resources, without the constant threat of environmental catastrophe. This is what the dinosaurs achieved, not through intelligence as we understand it, not through technology, not through domination of their environment, but through such perfect adaptation that they became one with the systems that sustained them. The great tragedy of the Mesozoic era is not that it ended, but that it had to end for us to exist. The asteroid that struck Earth 66 million years ago didn't just eliminate the non-avian dinosaurs, it destroyed the most successful biological experiment our planet had ever conducted. It erased a world where life had achieved something we still struggle to understand: perfect harmony between abundance and sustainability. Yet as you rest here tonight, you carry within your deepest biology the memory of that harmony. Your body knows rhythms that were established in the Mesozoic seas. Your breathing follows patterns first perfected by creatures that lived alongside the dinosaurs. Your very cells contain the molecular machinery that once powered those impossible giants. The peace you feel when you're deeply connected to the natural world, the sense of belonging you experience when you're surrounded by living systems, the profound calm that comes from recognizing your place in something larger than yourself, these are echoes of Mesozoic harmony still resonating in your biological memory. Tonight, as sleep begins to claim you, you're participating in one of the oldest activities on Earth. Rest, recovery, the daily rhythm of activity and repose. These patterns were already ancient when the first dinosaurs walked the Earth. They connect you to every creature that has ever lived, ever breathed, ever dreamed under the same stars that shone on the Mesozoic world. You are not separate from that ancient harmony. You are its continuation, its latest expression, its hope for the future. In your capacity for wonder, for peace, for recognition of beauty and meaning in the natural world, the Mesozoic era lives on. The giants may be gone, but the dream of perfect balance between life and world continues in every breath you take, every heartbeat, every moment of deep rest that restores your body and soul for another day of being magnificently, impossibly alive. As our journey through deep time begins to settle into a more contemplative rhythm, we find ourselves standing at the edge of one of Earth's greatest transitions. The Cretaceous period is drawing toward its close, but before we witness that ending, let's pause to appreciate the world at its most magnificent. This is the Earth of 70 million years ago, a planet that has perfected the art of being alive. The climate has settled into a gentle warmth that extends from pole to pole. The great land masses have begun their slow drift toward the positions they hold today, creating new coastlines, new mountain ranges, new opportunities for life to experiment with form and function. And in this world of endless summer, something beautiful is finally happening. The first flowers are beginning to bloom. Imagine walking through a forest where ferns still dominate the understory and conifers still tower overhead, but scattered here and there, like shy visitors from the future, small flowering plants add touches of color to the endless green. These early flowers are modest things, simple, four-petaled blossoms that seem almost apologetic for their brightness in a world that has thrived for so long without them. But their impact is already beginning to ripple through ecosystems in ways that will transform Earth as profoundly as the rise of the dinosaurs themselves. The first bees are evolving, insects that will form partnerships with flowering plants so intimate that neither can exist without the other. The first flowering trees are taking root, species that will eventually give rise to the hardwood forests that clothe much of the modern world. Yet this transformation is happening slowly, gently, without disrupting the great harmonies that have sustained Mesozoic life for over 100 million years. The flowering plants are not replacing the older forms of vegetation. They're simply adding their voices to a chorus that has room for every kind of beauty. In the warm seas of this ancient world, new forms of marine life are flourishing. Rudest bivalves build reefs that rival modern coral systems, creating underwater cities where fish of impossible beauty swim through forests of living stone. Ammonites with shells the size of truck tires jet through the water column, their tentacles trailing like living ribbons in the current. But perhaps most remarkably, the dinosaurs themselves have begun to experiment with new forms of beauty and intelligence. In the forests of Asia, small theropods have developed feathers of such intricate beauty that they seem like living jewels. Epidexipteryx, no larger than a pigeon, sports 4 ribbon-like tail feathers that serve no purpose other than display pure ornamentation in a world that has learned to appreciate beauty for its own sake. The great predators, too, have evolved beyond simple hunting machines. Carnotaurus, the meat-eating bull, possesses forward-facing eyes that suggest sophisticated depth perception and hunting strategies. Its skull is adorned with horns that speak of complex social behaviors, ritualized contests that allow these powerful creatures to establish dominance without the waste of lethal combat. Even more remarkable are the discoveries being made about dinosaur intelligence. Fossil trackways show evidence of complex social behaviors, adults protecting young coordinated hunting strategies, migration patterns that span continents. Some species built nests with temperature-regulating systems more sophisticated than anything in the modern world, using decomposing vegetation to maintain precise incubation temperatures for their eggs. Triceratops herds moved across the landscape in formations that suggest not just group living, but genuine social intelligence. Fossil evidence shows that injured individuals were cared for by the group, that the sick and elderly were protected rather than abandoned. These were not simple animals driven by instinct, but creatures capable of empathy, planning, and care for their community. As you let your breathing become even slower and deeper, imagine yourself witnessing one of these great migrations. The ground trembles with the footsteps of thousands of Triceratops, moving across the plains of ancient North America. Their three-horned faces and elaborate frills catch the light of the setting sun, creating a river of living shields that flows across the landscape like some primordial army. But there's no violence in this procession, no desperate flight from predators or frantic rush toward resources. This is simply the seasonal movement of creatures so perfectly adapted to their world that they can afford to travel at a pace that accommodates the youngest and oldest members of their community. They stop to rest in the shade of giant sequoias. They pause to drink from rivers that run clear and clean from mountain sources that have never known pollution. The air around them is filled with the calls of pterosaurs, some no larger than sparrows, others with wingspans that challenge imagination. Quetzalcoatlus, with wings stretching 35 feet from tip to tip, soars overhead like a feathered airplane, riding thermals with an efficiency that modern aircraft can only dream of achieving. In the distance, the long necks of sauropods sway above the forest canopy like living towers, their movements so synchronized they seem to be conducting some vast, slow symphony of consumption and contentment. These giants have reached sizes that will never be equaled by land animals, yet they move through their world with the grace of dancers, each step perfectly placed, each movement economical and purposeful. This is life at its most magnificent, not because of competition or struggle, but because of harmony. Every creature in this ancient world has found its perfect niche, its ideal relationship with every other living thing. The result is an ecosystem so stable, so productive, so beautiful, that it seems less like reality than like some impossible dream of what life could become if given enough time to find its rhythm. But even as we marvel at this perfection, we know that change is coming, not the gradual, gentle change that has characterized most of the Mesozoic, but something sudden and catastrophic. The asteroid that will end the Age of Dinosaurs is already hurtling through space, though it won't arrive for several million years yet. Tonight, though, we rest in the knowledge that for this moment, for this eternal Cretaceous evening, all is well. The great experiment in biological harmony continues. The giants still walk the earth. The impossible is still commonplace, and the world is still young enough to believe in its own magic. As we settle deeper into our contemplation of the Mesozoic world, a gentler mystery begins to reveal itself. Beyond the spectacle of giants and the drama of evolution, there were forces at work in this ancient world that operated on scales both vast and intimate, shaping life in ways so subtle they've only recently been discovered. Deep beneath the surface of Mesozoic ecosystems, networks of relationship and communication were developing that make our modern understanding of nature seem almost primitive. The roots of ancient conifers were already partnering with fungi in relationships so complex they effectively created a single superorganism spanning entire forests. Through hair-like fungal threads finer than spider silk, nutrients moved from tree to tree across distances measured in miles. A giant sequoia dying at the edge of a forest could share its final stores of nutrients with seedlings at the forest's heart. A conifer, thriving in rich soil, could support its neighbors struggling in poor ground. The entire forest breathed together, shared resources together, lived and died as a single, vast organism. Picture yourself shrinking down to witness this hidden world, becoming small enough to walk among these fungal networks that connect root to root like a biological internet. The forest floor is alive with communication you never imagined, chemical signals passing from plant to plant, warnings about insect attacks, invitations to share surplus nutrients, even messages of comfort to plants under stress. This discovery has revolutionized our understanding of how ecosystems work, but in the Mesozoic world, these networks had already been operating for millions of years. The stability that characterized Mesozoic forests, their ability to thrive, unchanged for geological ages, was built on these hidden foundations of mutual support and communication. But the most beautiful aspect of these ancient networks was their inclusivity. Every plant, from the mightiest conifer to the humblest fern, could participate in the sharing. Even the early flowering plants, newcomers to ecosystems that had been stable for eons, were welcomed into these networks and supported as they found their place in established communities. This was cooperation on a scale that challenges our most basic assumptions about nature. Not survival of the fittest as a war of each against all, but survival of the most connected, the most willing to share, the most capable of recognizing that individual well-being and community well-being are not separate things but aspects of a single reality. Above ground, similar networks were developing among the animal communities. Herds of herbivorous dinosaurs didn't just travel together for protection, they created complex information-sharing systems that allowed them to track resources across vast distances. When one group found fresh vegetation or clean water, chemical signals carried the news to other groups hundreds of miles away. Even more remarkably, different species shared information with each other. The keen eyesight of hadrosaurs could spot danger from miles away, and their warning calls were understood by ceratopsians, sauropods, and even some of the smaller theropods. Mixed herds were common, with different species contributing different abilities to the collective survival strategy. Imagine being present at one of these gathering places where multiple species came together to share resources and information. A watering hole at the edge of a vast plain where Parasaurolophus with their elaborate head crests arrive alongside Triceratops families, where smaller ornithopods dart between the legs of giants, where even some of the more peaceful theropods come to drink and rest. The sounds alone would be unlike anything in the modern world. The musical calls of hadrosaurs, complex melodies that carry information about food sources, weather patterns, and safe travel routes. The deeper rumbles of ceratopsians, low-frequency communications that can travel for dozens of miles. The whispered conversations of smaller species, quick exchanges of local information about the best plants to eat or the safest places to nest. But underneath all these voices connecting them all is something even more beautiful. The sound of perfect ecological balance. No species is struggling for survival. No group is desperately competing for limited resources. Everything exists in such abundance that sharing is not just possible but natural, inevitable, the obvious way for intelligent creatures to relate to their world and each other. This abundance wasn't accidental. It was the result of 100 million years of evolutionary fine-tuning, of species learning to work with their environment rather than against it, of life discovering that cooperation creates more resources than competition ever could. As your breathing continues to slow and deepen, let yourself feel surrounded by this ancient abundance. You exist in a world where every need is met, where your well-being is connected to the well-being of every other living thing, where the intelligence of the whole system supports and nurtures your individual growth and happiness. This is not fantasy, but biological reality. The same principles that created Mesozoic abundance still operate today, still connect you to every other living thing through networks of relationship and mutual support that exist whether you're aware of them or not. The oxygen you breathe was created by plants. The food you eat grew from soil enriched by countless other organisms. The very atoms of your body have been cycling through the biosphere for billions of years, connecting you physically and chemically to every creature that has ever lived. You are not alone. You never have been. You are part of a living system so vast and interconnected that your individual well-being and the well-being of the whole planet are not separate concerns, but aspects of a single reality that has been expressing itself through countless forms for hundreds of millions of years. In the depths of Mesozoic time, rhythms were established that still pulse through your body tonight. Cycles so fundamental they operate below the level of consciousness, yet shape every aspect of your existence. As we explore these patterns, let yourself sink into the deep peace that comes from recognizing the ancient wisdom built into the very structure of life. The most obvious of these rhythms is the daily cycle of light and darkness that has remained essentially unchanged for billions of years. In the Mesozoic world, creatures arose with the sun and settled into rest as darkness fell, just as your own body wants to do tonight. But what's remarkable is how this simple rhythm created space for different aspects of life to flourish in their proper time. The great herbivorous dinosaurs were creatures of the day, their massive bodies requiring sunlight to help regulate temperature and energy production. As evening approached, their feeding slowed, their movements became more deliberate, their attention turned inward. Picture a herd of Brontosaurus as the sun sets over a Jurassic landscape, their long necks gradually lowering as the peaceful stupor of approaching night settles over their enormous forms. But as the giants settled into rest, other worlds awakened. The night belonged to the smaller creatures, the early mammals that scurried through the undergrowth, the nocturnal pterosaurs that hunted insects by moonlight, the marine reptiles that rose to the surface of warm seas to breathe under stars that shone with perfect clarity through unpolluted atmosphere. These daily rhythms created a kind of temporal ecosystem where different forms of life shared the same space by occupying different times. Competition was reduced not through conflict, but through scheduling, each species finding its perfect moment in the daily cycle of planetary rotation. But even deeper than daily rhythms were the seasonal cycles that shaped Mesozoic life in ways both obvious and subtle. Though the climate was warmer and more stable than today's, there were still variations in temperature, rainfall, and light that created annual patterns of abundance and scarcity, activity and rest. The great migrations of herbivorous dinosaurs followed these seasonal rhythms with a precision that seems almost mystical. Herds numbering in the millions moved across continents in response to changes in vegetation, arriving at feeding grounds exactly when new growth was most nutritious, departing just as resources became scarce. These migrations weren't desperate flights from famine, but graceful dances with abundance, choreographed over millions of years of evolutionary refinement. Each species knew its role, its timing, its place in a continental ballet of movement and rest that ensured every ecosystem received exactly the right amount of browsing pressure at exactly the right time. Imagine standing on a hill overlooking the great interior seaway that split North America during the Cretaceous period, watching as rivers of dinosaurs flow across the landscape below you. Ceratopsians in their thousands, their frills catching the morning light like living shields. Hadrosaurs moving in perfect formation, their musical calls creating a symphony that carries across hundreds of miles. Sauropods swaying through the midst of smaller species like gentle giants, conducting an orchestra of lesser instruments. This movement is not random or chaotic, but follows patterns as precise as the movements of planets around the sun. Each herd knows exactly where it's going, exactly when it needs to arrive, exactly how long it can stay before moving on. The timing has been perfected over geological ages, refined until it achieves a precision that makes human logistics look crude and wasteful. But perhaps the most profound rhythms operating in the Mesozoic world were the geological cycles, the slow breathing of the Earth itself as continents moved and mountain ranges rose and fell over millions of years. These changes happened so slowly that individual animals never noticed them, yet they shaped the evolution of life in ways that were both subtle and profound. The breakup of Pangaea during the Mesozoic wasn't a catastrophe but an opportunity, creating new coastlines, new climate patterns, new chances for isolated populations to evolve in different directions. As the Atlantic Ocean opened, as India began its journey toward Asia, as the ancestors of the Rocky Mountains began to rise, life responded with creativity and adaptability that transformed Earth from a single great continent into a planet of specialized ecosystems. Each of these changes created new niches, new opportunities, new experiments in what it meant to be alive. The isolation of Australia led to unique evolutionary experiments. The formation of new mountain ranges created high-altitude environments where different rules applied. The opening of new ocean basins allowed marine life to diversify in ways that had never been possible before. Yet through all these changes, the fundamental harmony of Mesozoic ecosystems remained intact. Species adapted, migrated, evolved, but the basic patterns of cooperation and balance that had made the era so stable continued to operate. Life found ways to maintain its essential rhythms even as the stage on which those rhythms played out slowly transformed. Tonight, as you rest in the peace of approaching sleep, you're participating in rhythms that were ancient when the first dinosaurs walked the earth. Your breathing slows and deepens according to patterns established in the first air-breathing creatures. Your heartbeat follows rhythms that have been refined over hundreds of millions of years. Your brain waves shift into patterns that connect you to the rest experienced by every creature that has ever dreamed under Earth's ancient skies. You are not separate from these vast cycles, but part of them, a conscious participant in patterns so large and slow that they seem eternal, yet so intimate and immediate that they operate in every cell of your body. The same forces that shape the Mesozoic world continue to shape you, to support you, to carry you forward into rest and restoration that connects you to the deepest wisdom of life itself. As our journey through Mesozoic time begins to approach its peaceful conclusion, let us expand our perspective to embrace the vast scales on which this ancient drama unfolded, scales that put both the grandeur of dinosaurs and the urgency of human existence into a context so large it becomes profoundly calming. The Mesozoic era lasted 185 million years. To understand what this means, imagine that each year of your life represents 1,000 years of Mesozoic time. If you lived to be 100 years old, your entire lifetime would represent only 100,000 years of this vast epoch. The reign of the dinosaurs was nearly 2,000 times longer than the entire span of human civilization. This perspective transforms our understanding of what the Mesozoic world achieved. The stability of its ecosystems, the perfection of its biological relationships, the harmony between its countless species. These weren't temporary accidents, but achievements tested and refined across geological ages. When we marvel at the efficiency of sauropod physiology or the beauty of feathered dinosaurs, we're witnessing innovations that had millions of lifetimes to reach perfection. Picture yourself standing at the beginning of Triassic time, 252 million years ago, witnessing the first small dinosaurs taking their tentative steps toward evolutionary dominance. If you could live for the entire span of the Mesozoic era, you would watch these modest creatures slowly, generation by generation, explore every possible way of being large, being swift, being intelligent, being beautiful. You would see Coelophysis, no bigger than a large dog, gradually give rise to lines of descendants that would eventually produce Tyrannosaurus rex and Giganotosaurus. You would witness the first tentative attempts at flight evolve into the soaring mastery of Quetzalcoatlus. You would watch neck lengths slowly increase over millions of years until they reached the impossible proportions of Mamenchisaurus and Sauroposeidon. But even more remarkable than these physical transformations would be the gradual refinement of behaviors, relationships, and ecological strategies. Over tens of millions of years, you would watch predator-prey relationships evolve from simple chase-and-catch dynamics into complex dances of strategy and counter-strategy. You would see the development of elaborate social structures, communication systems, and cooperative behaviors that made Mesozoic ecosystems models of efficiency and stability. The timescales involved in this grand experiment dwarf not just human history, but the history of our entire species. Homo sapiens has existed for perhaps 300,000 years, a mere blink of an eye compared to the Mesozoic span. The entirety of human civilization, from the first agricultural settlements to the present moment, represents less than 1/10,000th of Mesozoic time. This vast temporal perspective brings with it a profound peace. The anxieties and urgencies that dominate human life, the sense that everything must be accomplished quickly or not at all, fade into insignificance when viewed against the patient rhythms of geological time. The Mesozoic world succeeded precisely because it had time to try everything, to test every possible approach to being alive, to refine every adaptation until it achieved perfection. Now expand your perspective even further, beyond Earth, beyond the solar system, to the cosmic context in which the Mesozoic drama unfolded. During those 185 million years, our Sun completed nearly one full orbit around the center of the Milky Way galaxy. The entire solar system traveled through different regions of space, encountering varying levels of cosmic radiation, different stellar neighbors, different gravitational influences. Yet through all this cosmic wandering, the Mesozoic ecosystems remained stable, protected by Earth's magnetic field and atmosphere, sustained by the steady nuclear fusion occurring at the heart of our star. The dinosaurs lived their lives unaware that they were riding a small planet through the vast darkness of space, that their world was part of a galaxy containing hundreds of billions of other stars, many of which likely harbored their own experiments in biological complexity. This cosmic perspective adds another layer of wonder to the Mesozoic achievement. Life didn't just succeed on Earth, it succeeded while Earth was hurtling through space at thousands of miles per hour, spinning on its axis, orbiting the Sun, part of a solar system racing around the galactic center at speeds that would make interstellar travel seem leisurely by comparison. The stability that allowed dinosaurs to thrive for 185 million years was achieved not in some static, unchanging environment, but on a dynamic planet moving through a dynamic cosmos, constantly encountering new conditions, new challenges, new opportunities for growth and adaptation. Tonight, as you prepare for sleep, you're participating in this same cosmic dance. The Earth is still spinning, still orbiting the Sun, still carrying you through space at incredible speeds. Yet you feel perfectly still, perfectly safe, perfectly at peace. This is the same peace that allowed Mesozoic life to flourish, the deep stability that underlies all apparent motion and change. You are not just resting in your bed, you're resting on a planet that has successfully supported complex life for hundreds of millions of years. A planet that has weathered cosmic storms and climatic changes and mass extinctions, yet continues to provide the perfect conditions for consciousness to emerge, to wonder, to explore its own origins and meaning. The same forces that sustained the dinosaurs sustain you tonight. The same sun that powered Mesozoic ecosystems warms your world. The same moon that lit the paths of nocturnal pterosaurs shines outside your window. You are part of a cosmic story so vast and beautiful that your individual existence, brief as it may be, participates in something truly eternal. In the morning, you will wake refreshed and restored, ready to continue your own small part in this ongoing experiment in consciousness and complexity. But tonight, you can rest in the knowledge that you are supported by systems so stable, so tested, so perfectly calibrated that they have supported life through changes that span geological ages. You are safe in the embrace of forces that have been caring for living creatures since long before the first dinosaur drew breath, and will continue caring for life long after the last star burns out in the distant future. There is no obvious survival advantage in your ability to be moved by the story of Mesozoic life. Your genes won't be more successfully passed on because you can appreciate the elegance of sauropod engineering or feel wonder at the flight of ancient pterosaurs. Yet here you are, spending hours of your precious life contemplating creatures that vanished from Earth long before your species even existed. This capacity for what we might call trans-temporal empathy, this ability to care about and find meaning in the experiences of beings radically different from ourselves and separated from us by vast spans of time, represents something unprecedented in the history of evolution. As far as we know, no other species has ever developed the ability to reconstruct and emotionally connect with vanished worlds in the way humans can. But perhaps even more mysterious is the fact that this capacity seems to bring us peace. Contemplating the vast scales of geological time, the patient rhythms of evolution, the deep stability of systems that operated successfully for hundreds of millions of years, somehow calms the frantic urgency that characterizes so much of modern human existence. Why should knowing about the Mesozoic world help you sleep? Why should understanding your connection to ancient biological rhythms make you feel more at home in the universe? Why should recognizing your place in evolutionary processes that span geological ages reduce anxiety rather than increase it? These questions point towards something profound about the nature of consciousness itself. Perhaps awareness isn't just an accidental byproduct of neural complexity, but something more fundamental. Something that emerges whenever matter and energy organize themselves in patterns capable of recognizing and responding to the deeper harmonies that govern reality. If this is true, then your ability to find peace in contemplating the Mesozoic world isn't strange or inexplicable, but natural and inevitable. You feel at home in these ancient rhythms because you are part of them. You find meaning in these vast scales because meaning emerges whenever consciousness encounters the patterns that connect all phenomena across space and time. The dinosaurs themselves might have experienced something similar. When a Parasaurolophus lifted its elaborate crest toward the evening sky and called across the landscape to its distant kin, when a herd of Triceratops paused in their migration to watch the sun set over an inland sea, when a Therizinosaurus stood motionless among the trees, its feathered arms spread wide to catch the morning light, were these creatures experiencing something analogous to what you feel when you encounter natural beauty? The evidence suggests they might have been. The same brain structures that generate aesthetic appreciation in modern birds existed in their dinosaur ancestors. The same capacity for finding peace in natural settings that helps you sleep tonight may have helped ancient creatures find their own forms of rest and restoration in the warm, stable world they inhabited for so many millions of years. This suggests that consciousness, wherever it arises, naturally tends toward recognition of beauty, appreciation of harmony, and the development of what we can only call wisdom. Not practical knowledge about how to survive or reproduce, but deeper understanding of how to live in harmony with the patterns that sustain life across geological ages. The great mystery, then, is not why the Mesozoic world was so stable and successful, but why consciousness inevitably seems to recognize and be moved by that stability and success. Why does awareness naturally gravitate toward harmony, beauty, and patterns that connect individual existence to larger wholes? Perhaps the answer lies in consciousness itself being a manifestation of the same organizing principles that created the stability of Mesozoic ecosystems, the efficiency of dinosaur physiology, the beauty of feathered displays, and the harmony of predator-prey relationships that persisted for geological ages. If consciousness emerges from the same deep patterns that govern all complex systems, then it makes sense that awareness would recognize and be comforted by encounters with those patterns, whether in the form of ancient ecosystems, mathematical relationships, artistic compositions, or the simple rhythm of breath that carries you towards sleep. This mystery remains unsolved because it touches on the deepest questions about the nature of reality itself. Is consciousness something that happens inside brains, or is it something that brains participate in? Are we isolated islands of awareness in an unconscious universe? Or are we expressions of a more fundamental consciousness that manifests wherever matter and energy organize themselves into sufficiently complex patterns? The Mesozoic world offers tantalizing hints about these questions. The cooperation that characterized its ecosystems, the information-sharing networks that connected species across vast distances, the emergence of behaviors that seem to serve beauty and meaning rather than mere survival, all suggest that consciousness and intelligence might be more distributed, more fundamental, more deeply woven into the fabric of reality than our human-centered perspective usually recognizes. Tonight, as you settle into the deep rest that connects you to billions of years of biological rhythm, you carry this mystery with you into your dreams. You are simultaneously the observer of these ancient patterns and a participant in them, simultaneously separate from the Mesozoic world and continuous with it, simultaneously an individual consciousness and an expression of something larger that has been exploring what it means to be aware for hundreds of millions of years. The mystery deepens rather than resolves as you drift towards sleep, but this deepening brings peace rather than anxiety. Some questions are more beautiful than any answer could be, some mysteries more meaningful than any solution. The mystery of why consciousness finds meaning in contemplating its own deep history may be one of these eternal questions, forever enriching rather than frustrating the awareness that carries it. In your dreams tonight, you may find yourself walking through forests that vanished 100 million years ago, breathing air that no human lungs have ever tasted, witnessing sights that existed long before your species learned to wonder about its own existence. These dreams are not fantasies, but memories, not inventions, but recognitions, not escapes from reality, but encounters with deeper levels of the reality of which you are and have always been an inseparable part. The dinosaurs are gone, but the mystery they embodied continues in you. The Mesozoic world has ended, but the principles that sustained it for 185 million years continue to operate in your own biology, your own consciousness, your own capacity to find peace in recognizing your connection to patterns larger and older and more enduring than individual existence. Tonight, you have traveled farther than any human has ever journeyed in the flesh, deeper than any time machine could carry you, into realms more magnificent than any fantasy could imagine. You have walked with giants through forests of incredible beauty, breathed the thick air of ancient atmospheres, witnessed the daily life of creatures so perfectly adapted to their world that they achieved a harmony between individual existence and cosmic process that lasted for 185 million years. You discovered that Earth once thrived without flowers for longer than flowers have existed with them, that creatures larger than any living land animal moved with the grace of dancers, that intelligence and consciousness took forms so different from our own that they challenge every assumption about what awareness can become. You learned that you are not separate from this ancient world, but continuous with it, that the very atoms of your body, the rhythms of your breathing, the capacity for wonder that drew you into this story, all connect you intimately to life forms that seem impossibly distant, yet remain immediately present in your own biology and consciousness. You encountered the mystery of why consciousness finds meaning and beauty in contemplating its own deep history, why awareness seems naturally drawn to recognize its participation in patterns that span geological ages, why understanding your place in evolutionary time brings peace rather than anxiety. But perhaps most importantly, you experience the profound rest that comes from recognizing your place in systems so stable, so tested, so perfectly calibrated that they sustained complex life through changes that dwarf anything in human history. You felt the deep peace of belonging to something larger than individual existence, something that has been supporting conscious life for hundreds of millions of years and will continue doing so for unimaginable ages yet to come. Next time, we will explore another chapter in this ongoing story of consciousness and cosmos, perhaps diving into the oceans that covered Earth before life learned to walk on land, or traveling forward to contemplate what consciousness might become in futures as distant from us as we are from the dinosaurs. But tonight, you rest in the knowledge that you are part of the greatest story ever told, the story of matter learning to know itself, of energy organizing into patterns capable of wonder, of a universe awakening to its own beauty through countless eyes, including yours, that have been shaped by evolutionary processes tested across the deepest reaches of time. If this journey has brought you the peace and wonder it was intended to provide, know that you carry within yourself the capacity to return to this place of deep connection whenever you need, reminding of your place in the cosmic story that continues to unfold through your dreams, your rest, your renewal for whatever wonders tomorrow may bring. Sweet dreams, fellow traveler in time. May your rest be as deep and restorative as the sleep that has refreshed conscious creatures for hundreds of millions of years, and may you wake tomorrow with renewed appreciation for the magnificent impossibility of simply being alive in this ancient, ever-changing, eternally beautiful universe.